Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Launchpad's Pick and Mix podcast. And today we have got arguably the most powerful teacher in the world, shall we say, in Patrice Bain. Now, you may know of her from the books that she's been writing, the kind of Powerful series, which we'll talk a bit more about later on. And like most of my guests, I've been a fan from afar, and you'll very quickly recognise that Patrice is not from England, and so hence the from afar. But yeah, I'm absolutely delighted that she's joined us today, and we can hear more about her story. So yeah, welcome to the podcast, Patrice.
Thank you so much.
Amazing.
It's an absolute
Well, let's get
pleasure to
started
be
and
here.
tell us a
Thanks
little
for
bit
being
about
here.
maybe what you do now, but then take us on a bit of a journey back in time.
Okay. Now, I am so fortunate in that I am able to work with teachers around the world. I offer professional development. I speak at conferences. Uh,
Wow.
Last weekend, I was in Denver keynoting a research ed in Denver. Earlier
Ooh.
this year, I was able to speak in Dubai. I've been at research ed in England, Canada, and it is
Yeah,
just
wow.
such a joy for me to be able to work with teachers and talk about learning.
Yeah.
One of my
And so
favorite
tell us a bit about how
topics.
did you get to this point? What have you done for the rest of your career?
Well, I began, I should, this goes way back, but I actually,
Okay.
teaching was my second career that I started
Right.
as a counselor. And I worked with various types of populations. And one of the last positions I had as a counselor was I had started an outpatient
Right.
program. It's a long title here for pediatrics and adolescents with chemical
Wow.
dependency and stress issues. So every person that I worked with was from the ages of 7 to 18 who was either chemically dependent
Right.
or had made suicide attempts. And this was so fulfilling to me because I
Mm.
saw such potential in every single student. And and it got me thinking because I connected, I there were many people that I worked with, and I connected with every single one. And I had a thought, and that was, what if each one of these folks, these children, had had someone in their life other than a parent who
Yeah.
could connect with them at that level? And that is when, to me, it
Right.
was a calling to become a teacher. And so I quit my job. I went back to school and uh, got my teaching certificate, got my master's, and started teaching. And I just
Amazing.
never looked back. It, to me, really was a calling. And it wouldn't have worked if I had,
No.
started when I was 20 years old. It took my life experiences to help me be the
Yeah. And
best
did you have a specific
teacher that
subject
I
that you
can be.
taught?
Yes, I taught middle school, which is an age I love. So this would be
Right.
11 to 14-year-olds.
Oh.
And I taught history. And to me, that is the best subject. It's better than any movie. You have the worst villains, you have incredible love
Oh man.
stories, you have grand adventures. And so I loved absolutely bringing
I
all
love
this
that.
history
And that's funny you
alive
say that
for
because you're
children.
right. If you do look back on history, it itself would make an incredible movie, wouldn't it? Um, Amazing. All right. Well, that's great to hear a
Yes.
bit more about that. Well, for those that are new to the podcast, we have a series of kind of set activities, I suppose, or set elements to the podcast, which Patrice has chosen ahead of time and gives a bit of a structure. And the first one that we do is something called a fast friends question, and these have been designed by researchers to kind of create connections between people as quickly as possible, and they get increasingly vulnerable, and you'll see that as we go through the podcast. But the first one that Patrice chose was, given the choice of anyone dead or alive, who would you choose as a dinner guest? So who is it? Who did you choose?
Well, this might be
Okay.
one of my most vulnerable moments,
Oh, nice.
but I would choose my mom.
Oh,
She
no.
died suddenly when I was a teenager, and had so much impact on me. And I just,
Yeah.
I would want to tell her about my family and my wonderful husband that she never got to meet, and her
God.
incredible grandchildren she never got to meet, and
Yeah.
um, my career and my students that
Yeah.
I I got to teach. Um, there's just so much. If there was any way just
Yeah.
to have one
Do you
more
recognize
dinner.
any personality traits in yourself from your mum? Did you?
She had a great laugh. and and I think that is her joy. Uh her
Right.
She had a lot of gumption. She didn't let things stop her. She was kind and generous, and so many
Right.
attributes that
Yeah.
I
Wow. Well, tell
ascribe
us a
to
bit about your
her.
family. How many children and grandchildren have you got? Right.
I have a son and daughter, and
Wow.
I have
Oh,
four
boys. Oh,
grandchildren, all boys, including, yes, all boys. I have four, and they range in age from, I have a 10, a
wow.
9, and
I
a
bet
5
that's
year old
lively when
twin.
they're all together.
Oh, love it. Had a sleepover over the weekend. My daughter and her family live 1 mile one way,
Oh,
and my son and
perfect.
his family live 1 mile the other way. And it's
Yeah,
it's
that
it's
does
a
sound good.
dream. It's an absolute
Amazing. Well,
dream.
that's lovely to hear that. And yeah, like you say, I think for lots of people that have lost, loved ones, there's a natural choice to want to have one more time to talk to them, and like I say, I mean, what an amazing situation that you've had such a great life that you do want to show that off to someone, which is nice. Okay, well, let's move on to your first ignition point. And again, if you're new to the podcast, this is an event or a person that's happened in in the guest's life that's had a transformational impact. And so the one that Patrice is chosen first is called career change. So tell us a bit more about that. Yeah, a little bit.
Well, I kind of already alluded to that. How just being able to connect with
Yeah,
those children who really had such major stressors, major problems, and knowing that my interaction with them led me to this
yeah,
incredible career I've had in teaching. And it gave me such a source of empathy in working with students, because seen I had seen children when they were at their all-time low, and it just
yeah.
really helped me
And I
connect
love what you said earlier about
with all of my students.
imagining that being that one person, that can be that connection. And I think for lots of us, we can think about that one person, and very often it is a teacher, isn't it? Did you gravitate towards kind of
Hmm.
students in need when you became a teacher?
I did. I absolutely did. I just, first of all, I always had my students line up in the hall. So I had usually about 180
Wow.
to 185 students every day. Uh, and I would always have them line up in the hall, um, because I wanted to greet each one individually. And I told them, I am going to peer into your eyes because I want to see what kind of day you're having. And, you know, students really responded to that, especially middle school students. And there was such a trust between us that if they were having a bad day, they let me know. Another story, early, very early in my teaching career, I had had a student the last period of the day, and he said, Mrs. Bain, he said, I just wanted to tell somebody all day something. And I said, well, tell me. And he said,
Oh,
my dog died last night and I haven't been able to tell anybody. And I thought, how can we have an 11-year-old
yeah,
child who lost a beloved dog and there wasn't anybody for him to talk to until the very last period of the day? And, that was so impactful to me. That's what
right.
got me started with peering into their eyes as they came in because, you know,
Yeah,
things happen outside of school to our students, and they need to have
yeah.
that person that they
Well, and
know they can
it makes me
rely on.
think that, and this is, I think there's quite a lot naturally, as most of my work is with kind of, teachers and leaders, that, there's not a dissimilar situation there, that, teachers and leaders have got lots of stuff going on. And I wonder whether they've got a space to be able to share that stuff. Yeah. And I guess as
Exactly.
leaders of
Yes.
teams, a bit like you did, really, one of our challenges, stroke, you know, jobs is to create a space where our staff can feel safe enough to come up and talk about the tough stuff that's happening, because whether we like it or not, that stuff's going to affect their performance, don't you think? Right.
Yes. Yes. What a gift to have a team that would have, um,
Yeah.
that type
I
of
worked in a school once,
relationship
and
going on.
we had a new member of the senior leadership team, and they came in and they started talking about being above the line or below the line. And we all kind of, listened, and it was quite long, basically the idea was that, above the line you were doing well and you were kind of, feeling good and all those sorts of things. But below the line you were feeling a little bit either off color or not very happy. And of course, the higher above the line and then the lower above the line is how you felt. But what came out of it, which was really useful, was we seemed to latch on to that language of but being below the line. And suddenly became like an instant way to tell a colleague that you kind of needed a bit of time or a bit of space to talk. People would do that kind of, that normal sort of, "Hey, Chris, how are you?" And I wouldn't have to go into much detail. I could just say, "Yeah, do you know what? I feel a bit below the line today." And that was almost like the signal to say, "I'm not feeling great. I want to talk about it." And so, yeah, that's stuck with me since then. Yeah.
Oh, I like
And then, of
that.
course,
That's
we then
really
started using it
good.
with students. And again, it create that sort of shared language where people could say, you know, "Oh, I'm above the line," or, that sort of thing. All right. Well, that's lovely to hear that. Yeah. Well, let's move into your first launchpad then. So again, for those that are new, the whole podcast really is based around this leadership launchpads book that started as a hobby and then became a kind of obsession, I suppose. But the guests get to choose two launch pads that resonate with them. And the first one that Patrice has chosen, I'm just going to share the screen for those that are watching this on video, is called Ignorance is Not Bliss. And I'll just kind of narrate a little bit about what I was thinking when I made it, and then we'll ask Patrice why it resonated with her. And so naturally, of course, you can imagine this goes back to that well-known saying. And my thoughts when I heard it, this idea that although ignorance is bliss might have some place in personal situations, definitely should not be something that we're using kind of in organizations or teams. So I started unpicking a little bit about that and what happens when I guess you are being ignorant to something. The first one being understanding. And of course, we cannot, there's no place for ignorance within teaching or professional development if you're working with adults, because of course, one of our jobs is to systematically check learners, and we include adults in this, understanding almost constantly, really, to make sure that we're uncovering any misconceptions, but also judging people's readiness to kind of move on. And so I started thinking that, when we get this wrong, we kind of miss misconceptions. So they stay embedded, don't they? And a lot of times they go on to breed more misconception, which is a problem. Ultimately, we kind of reduce confidence, because if people are getting things wrong and then we're not picking up on it, that's a problem. And of course, both those things lead to poor outcomes. I then started thinking about it from a leadership point of view in terms of implementation, because, we're busy people, and there's a sad kind of reality that you may take your eye off the ball when it comes to projects. And so for me, again, there's no place for ignorance with projects or change management. That idea of making sure that any pre-project planning is really robust, that you're not ignoring potential kind of roadblocks or issues. But also, more importantly for me anyway, because I'm not great at the monitoring phase of projects, I tend to like the exciting bit at the beginning, and then I'm on to something else, But that idea of robustly monitoring and evaluating processes as they go is super important, because of course, if we get that wrong, there's a good chance that we'll waste resources, and I mean kind of finance and time. Mistakes happen, of course, and ultimately that then reduces the impact of the project. And then the last one I thought of, which I think is probably the most important, it links back to what we said earlier with the above the line, below the line, or not peering into people's eyes, is that if we're ignorant about some of the interpersonal aspects of our jobs, then that's really tricky, because not only does it not allow us to build relationships with people, but it's dangerous in that we may miss some really important signals when it comes to people's kind of, well-being in itself, but performance and conflict and levels of imbalance. And so I then started thinking, if you are ignorant to the interpersonal elements and you don't regularly invest in those relationships, and people don't feel like they've got, I guess, they're not seen, then you can have real, detrimental impacts on people's motivation, their performance. And ultimately, it wouldn't surprise me that people either stay or leave organizations that they don't feel a sense of value, belonging, or kind of, validity, I suppose. But why did that resonate with you then, Patrice?
Oh, it resonated a lot with me. Uh, Let me start by sharing a story. Um, in my second question, or a future question coming up, I'll be talking more about some of the research in my classroom. But to answer this question, um, I always started every single first day after the research had started in my classroom saying, I'm your teacher
Right.
and I'm going to teach you how to learn. And the reason why I did that every single year was come second quarter, after the report cards had gone out, I would have students come up to me and say, Mrs. Bain, I have an A or I have a B in your class. And I always thought that was a little bit humorous because I'm the one that put the grades in the grade book. So I was well aware of that fact. And I would say, I know, but it happened every time. their demeanor would change and they would
Oh,
say,
really?
but I don't get good grades. And they'd sink a little bit lower and say, I usually get D's and F's. And then the dagger to the teacher heart would be when they would
Oh,
say,
yeah.
I'm not smart. And and how can we have educational systems where students internalize
Yeah.
failure by the time they are 11 years old? And I would look at that student and say, but look at you now. The only difference is now you're learning how to learn. And I think of it as issuing our students an invitation. It's like learning is this huge
I love
party
that.
when they had never received the invitation. And so we need to issue that invitation. And the reason why ignorance is bliss resonated with me is because too often we think we know about teaching, but do
Mm.
we really know about learning? And there's a big difference there. Teachers may be brand new to the profession or maybe have been teaching for many, many years, but it doesn't mean they know about how to learn. And so to me, we now know there is so much research available. We absolutely know best practices backed by evidence that promote and retain learning. And for, oh my gosh, once the research started years ago, I wanted to shout from mountaintops. Just, we know how kids learn. If students learn how to learn before they're 11, think about how their entire educational trajectory will change, about their social emotional
Yeah.
learning when they internalize success. And so we as teachers need to be able to ask when we are given professional development,
Yeah.
on what evidence is this based? We need, when we are taking classes, on what evidence is this based? We need, because it's out there, we need to stop, I don't want to say wasting time, but
Yeah.
there's ways to be more productive, to really encourage learning, to see success in our students.
No.
Ignorance is not bliss, because if we remain ignorant to learning, we are losing so many students every
Yeah.
year to internalizing failure.
Love
And
that.
we can change
Yeah.
this. We
And it
really
makes me
can.
think as well that for those of us, and lots of our listeners will be kind of, really into the evidence and the research and all that. But I also think that even for us, we need to be mindful that ignorance can creep back in, you know?
Yes. And can also lead to lethal mutations. If you kind of
Yeah.
think you know about a little, you're going to dabble a little bit,
It's dangerous, isn't it? Well, and yeah,
you know?
and again, we sometimes our environment forces us into that, don't they? If you're super busy, there's a danger that once you find some information, there's that confirmation bias, isn't it? Once you find some information that resonates and you think, oh, that makes sense to me, you think, well, that's the truth then, and you don't look any deeper, and there's a bit of danger there, isn't there? Yeah, interesting. All right.
Yeah. And so many things like, there's so
Yeah,
many neuro myths out there, things that are prevalent but there's no research that backs them up. Like, we only use 10% of our brain, or we're left brained or right brained, or learning styles, or, there's so many things that are still out there
we do. Yeah,
that
although I think my
we
wife
need to
might
put to bed.
suggest I only use 10% of my brain. Um, And so, yeah, maybe I'll put some evidence in front of her. All right. Well, let's keep pushing on. Let's get into your second kind of fast friend question. And this one you chose was, what do you value most in a friendship? Tell us about that.
I am so fortunate. I just have such wonderful friends near and far. And what really matters to me is that we're kindred spirits, that there is a mutual understanding and respect, um,
That's
that
nice.
you are each other's cheerleader, that you are each other's sounding board, shoulder to cry on, hilarious laughing partner. Uh, those are the types of qualities that I so value in my friendships. I have found that with professional friendships, my personal friendships, but those those
Yeah,
characteristics apply
really
to
interesting.
all.
I guess one of the things that I'm just reflecting on now as you speak is that idea that maybe we need to widen our use of the word friend, because like there might be a misconception that leaders can't be friends with their team members, or it's not wise to be friends. But if we remove the word friend and we look at the qualities that you talked about, leaders can provide a sounding board for their team members. They can add a kind of challenge partner to their. I like the idea of leaders and their teams being giggling partners. That sounds really cool. I like the idea there of that. But again, in that, there's a little bit of learning for leaders in that, having fun with your team and connecting on a slightly less kind of serious level might, be something that they want to do. Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
Yeah, and support, mutual support. It's not top down or bottom up, but you know, we need to support our leaders. Our leaders need to support us. Just there's this,
yeah,
it's so possible. I've had good leaders, great leaders. I've had not so great leaders. And, you're really right. I had not thought about this before, but those leaders that were my greatest leaders really had many of those
yeah,
characteristics of my good friends in being supportive and cheerleading and
yeah.
and listening
I
and
like that. I think that sometimes we
encouraging.
talk about either key takeaways or calls to action that people that are listening to this take away from the podcast. And I wonder whether that the one that resonates with me that I'm going to kind of take forward this week is this idea of cheerleading. I'm going to try this week and purposefully cheer for some other people, because I I remember how it feels when people do it for you, and certainly, and this is maybe not
Yes.
always the case, but if it's done in a public space as well, the effect is even more magnified, isn't it? And it goes back to that idea. I think you mentioned it
Yeah.
right at the beginning. This idea of lining students up. When you said that, I started thinking a bit about kind of Brene Brown and her kind of marbles in the jar. You know, 'cause it felt like every morning you were putting another marble in those jars. Um, and I guess cheerleading is another way of doing that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And important.
Okay. Well, now we're going to get on to finally. I'm excited about this one, and this is the ignition point, which you called research in my classroom. And so, tell us a bit about it, but tell us more. I'm really interested in how it changed you as a person and as a leader.
So I had been teaching probably 10 or 12 years. I had a master's degree. I taught at a couple universities along with middle school. And I had so
Yeah.
many unanswered questions. And the main ones were, why is it that some of the students in my class learn really well but some don't. If I'm the sage on the stage giving out all this profound information, right? Why do some get it and some not? And there was no place for me to go to find an answer. Most research, and this was back in 2006, most research was done in the United States at universities with
Right.
college students in laboratories. And the research was written in jargon that I didn't know how to read. And it was locked in ivory towers. I didn't even have access to it. And I was I was just so curious. And I happened to meet a cognitive scientist by the name of Mark McDaniel. And he introduced me to Dr. Henry Roediger. And McDaniel and Roediger are two of the authors of a fabulous book, Make It Stick. If you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. Uh, and we started talking, and they were talking about research they were doing on memory. And I was talking about my frustrations at the hows and whys. And they were at Washington University in St. Louis studying memory. And it was like this aha moment that they thought, in the United States, it has not yet been done where we study how
Right.
students learn in an authentic classroom.
Yeah.
I had a classroom who was very curious about learning. And so it was
Yeah.
like
Wow.
this divine intervention almost. And so they wrote a grant through the Institute of Education Sciences and the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. And they put this together to start the first research in the United States in an authentic
Wow.
classroom. And it was my
That's
classroom.
incredible.
I know. Can you believe that? It was
Yeah.
like, pinch me. I was so fortunate. But you know what? I don't think I realized how fortunate I was
Right.
until just a couple years ago because, um, again, I just wanted to have my hows and whys answered. And then I was very caught up in the research that I didn't realize at the time that it
Yeah.
was really a big deal. I was just understanding how my students learn. And it didn't really occur to
No.
me that that would ever become bigger. It was just, I was a classroom teacher and I was figuring out how my students in my classroom learn. And so the research started, and one of the first areas
Okay.
that we researched was retrieval. And whoa, it really worked. I mean, it was amazing. So another person from Washington University, Dr. Pooja Agarwal, came and worked with me in my classroom. A lot went in before I ever met Dr. Agarwal. A lot went into getting the study approved by my
Mhm.
superintendent, our school leaders, getting parents to agree. So there was a lot of behind the scenes work that was involved. And then, our first hypothesis was that retrieval worked. And uh, for that particular study, we realized, well, if the hypothesis is that retrieval works, it to us wouldn't be ethical to have some kids retrieving and some kids not. So we came up with the idea that there would be a bank, and the bank would be chapter
Okay.
test questions. And of the chapter test questions throughout the course of study, Some questions would be
Right.
retrieved and some wouldn't. Now, Dr. Agarwal took care of that part of the study where I had 6 different sections. So she would devise which questions would be retrieved for which section of students. And when this quizzing, it was done through a
Right.
quiz, I was not in the room. So I did not know which questions were retrieved,
Yeah.
which ones weren't, who got what. I just taught the way I normally would teach and gave the test as I would normally do, graded as I normally would,
Right.
and then she would do all the statistics from it. So it was really, I could not influence any of that. And what we found was normal grades may have been with just regular teaching, the
Right.
average would have been a C. But when retrieval was used,
Wow.
students went up to A's. I mean, we actually saw grades go from C to A only because a retrieval quiz had been given
Yeah. Wow.
during the course of study. And with that quiz, and then further studies were done that, so a study done at my school in a 7th grade science classroom was that there was a chapter test and it was divided into 3. Some items were not retrieved at all. Some items were students received a quiz but no feedback,
Sure.
like here's a quiz, you got 8 out of 10, or elaborative feedback of why or how retrieval really affected. And it was amazing. A test given 18 days later was
Yeah.
simply given that elaborative feedback made such a huge, huge difference. Well, then we started doing more and we realized that so many students really had anxiety when it came to taking tests. And so we started studying why do they have this anxiety and realized
Mm.
that if retrieval was infrequent or if it was only used for a high stakes exam, like you teach something in
Yeah. Yeah.
September and they don't see it again until a semester exam in December, it produced so much anxiety. So we did a study with
Wow.
1,500 high school students who used retrieval throughout the course of study and asked, does using retrieval make you
Yeah.
more or less anxious for unit tests? And the results were outstanding. Only 8% felt more
Love that.
stress for a
That's really.
unit exam.
Yeah.
That means 92% felt little or no stress. And why? Because when you use retrieval throughout the course of
Yeah. You almost.
study,
Yeah.
you're
You've
so ready.
normalized it, haven't
You
you?
know what to study and you're ready. Yeah. So we studied retrieval and we studied spacing and we studied
Yeah.
interleaving and we studied metacognition. And what we learned from the research was that
Yeah.
these were so powerful that in our book Powerful Teaching
Oh, I like
we
that.
coined the term power tools because they are something that every teacher can use:
Yeah.
retrieval, spacing, interleaving, metacognition, that
How
truly,
funny now that,
truly
of
promote
course,
learning.
in the UK, those terms are, are fairly well known, and it must be interesting for you now to think when people are saying, "Well, yeah, Patrice, of course you do retrieval." You can think, "Well, hold on, we didn't always think that. This was cutting edge at one point."
Exactly. Exactly. So this research started in my
Right. Wow, that
classroom
is a
in
long time ago.
2007. And yeah, which is amazing that wouldn't you think research has been
You
going
would
on for
think
a
so.
really long time? And that to do it with students in a classroom in the United States
Wow.
only started in
No.
2007, which is not that long ago. And so, like I said, I wanted to shout from the mountaintops, and it wasn't until probably um, more like 2015 that, I was presenting around the United States quite a bit by that time, and realizing that what we learned
Yeah.
truly could make a difference. Truly could make a difference. And I kept seeing that over and over and over again. Um, and then in 2018 is when Dr. Agarwal
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote Powerful Teaching, which pretty much
Journey, yeah.
chronicles
It's
that journey. And by that time, I realized, wow, I am
yeah,
so incredibly fortunate to be a part of
yeah.
something.
You got me thinking now about because when you were talking, it made me giggle a little bit. This idea that we get more confident in the things we do more often. You know, and it made me laugh. And I've shared this a few times on the podcast that when I did my doctorate in leadership confidence, my mum, who's not in education at all, was obviously interested in, she said, "Oh, what did you find out?" And I said, "Well, I found out that leaders are most confident in the things they do most often." And she went, "Oh, right. Well done." And she was like, "Oh, fifteen
It took
thousand
you
pounds
this
in 5 years,
degree to
do you know?"
understand that?
Well, exactly. And it
I'm
makes
your
me
mom.
think,
I've known that for
we'll
years.
have people in the future, won't we? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that the teachers that we're now training and telling them all about this retrieval practice, they go, "Oh, what? So if you tried to remember things, you remember them. Oh, right. Wow." You know. Oh dear. Anyway, I wonder what the current, like if that was new back then and now we think it's normal, I wonder what the new stuff is now. That would be interesting. What in 15 years' time, what will we be saying? But of course, who knows?
Oh, I think we're going to know
Yeah,
so much more about how the brain works, how the working memory actually leads to
yeah.
long term. I mean, we're getting there, but I think that's
I think you're right. Yeah, and I
there's a
think we
lot of
might,
research happening on
we
that.
might even start to relook at the more kind of relational aspects as well. Almost go full circle and go back to right. We've nailed the information processing, but where does motivation and engagement and all that stuff? Interesting. Okay, there's
Yes.
potential. We're running.
Oh,
Me and
the
you are running out of
potential.
time. We need to be 20 again. Okay, well, let's move on to the second of the launch pads then. So, this one is really interesting, and it came about because of, I guess, when people like yourself and I are in positions where naturally people come to us for advice. And one of the things that happened to me whilst I was kind of doing the book was I'd have people come up and they'd say things like, well, let me explain this first. So, the launchpad's called "Keep Your Eye on the Prize." If you're watching this on the video, you'll be able to see it. And I, the quote says, "Beginning with the end in mind is key if we want to ensure that we reach goals and expectations." And it comes about because I had people that would come up to me, and they still do now. They want to know sort of, is this any good or will this work? And I used to just launch straight into saying, well, yes, I think giving my opinion and giving my opinion. And I always realized that I can't really evaluate something accurately unless I know what the end goal was. So I can tell you I can tell you if it's any good based on what I think you want it to do. But maybe I'm wrong. And so I started kind of taking a coaching approach and not immediately answering that question. So in response to people saying, "What do you think of this?" or "Do you think this will work?" I would say, "Well, okay, it depends on what you want it to do. So you need to tell me a bit about the end goal before I can tell you whether it's going to be any good or not." And so I then started thinking, wow, if we don't have a really clear kind of view of the goal, or if we haven't begun with the end in mind, there's a few kind of pitfalls and dangers, I suppose. I mean, the obvious one being that if we haven't got a sense of what the goal is, then our strategy selection could be completely wrong. We may be choosing the wrong technique or the wrong process because we've got the kind of wrong goal. I then started thinking, if you break that down, I suppose, in terms of action steps, or sub goals, or maybe you want to call them, that if your kind of logic chain or your theory of change is not kind of accurate, then potentially you could go, wandering off in different directions, or kind of just choose the wrong sort of steps. And before you know it, you look up and you're in a completely different place. And then the last one I was thinking about was, of course, if you haven't got a really clear view of the final destination, then you can't do those really important kind of course corrections as you go, because you're heading towards the goal that you think you should be heading towards without really knowing that the goal that you should be heading for is in a different direction. And so I started just kicking that around in my head, and it's been fascinating ever since, because it's quite a difficult question to ask people. They're not usually ready for it. They've come to you for an answer and they're not expecting another question. And then sometimes they answer the question for themselves in the ultimate coaching way. But why did this one resonate with you?
Well, it goes right back to everything I've been saying the whole time since I wanted to shout from the mountaintops that keeping the eye on the prize. It is our goal should not be simply
Hmm.
to teach curriculum. Our goal should not be to see high grades, but the prize is that we're teaching our students how to learn, because that is the lifelong difference that's going to make to them. And having that mind shift from I'm teaching my curriculum to
Yeah.
I'm teaching my students how to learn. And part of that is them learning the curriculum. That there's a real mind shift there. And I think what we truly need to do is to keep our mind on that prize. And that prize is learning, not simply high grades, not, to get through chapters, but the prize is the
Yeah.
learning that our
That's really
students get.
fascinating. I like that idea of it's nice to use that as an example. That idea of, I get invited into lots of classrooms, to sort of provide feedback and stuff. And again, I suppose you could use it in that situation, couldn't you? If someone says, "Oh, what did you think of my lesson?" You say, "Well, tell me a bit what you were hoping to achieve first." you know, um, and I guess if we haven't got time to go
Right.
into this, but you could, as you've started to do, think about what is the goal of education. Quite a lofty kind of thing, because we
Yes.
are heading in a certain direction towards a goal. Whether that is the right goal is a whole nother story, I suppose. And then another thing that made
And answering
what are
your
we trying to do
question,
here? And
what do we want
I
to
also
achieve?
started thinking, Annie, when you were talking then about how it's probably not helpful. Well, it probably is helpful to have shifting goals, because there'll be some people who listen to this who will say, well, I agree, Patrice. However, they've got a test in a certain amount of time, and we've got to give them the content. And I don't think we are suggesting that that shouldn't be the goal, but that's almost like a sub goal and a temporary goal, isn't it? And a nice idea to have.
Right. Because when you teach your students how to learn, they are going to they're going to learn and they're going to get great grades and they're going to, it's like, it's it's not just the
Yeah,
curriculum.
yeah, yeah.
It's when you add it with learning. That is,
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
that's a
And that idea of
whole
having kind
thing.
of goals that are relevant and useful and important for that period of time for that purpose, and then you switch. Wow. Okay. Well, we have come to the final question. Dun, dun. So this is Patrice's final kind of fast friends question, and she's chosen when did you last cry in front of another person? But there's a little twist to this because I was telling Patrice a story at the beginning which nearly made her cry. So I might have ruined the whole podcast because the actual answer to this question is about 50 minutes ago when we first started talking. But tell us a bit about the reason you chose this question. When was that?
Well, I chose the question and had so many ways that I could have answered that.
Yeah.
But there was a more recent situation that made me cry. And that was I was observing a school board meeting, and a student got up, and I did not know her. She had never been one of my students. She got up and she was talking about what a difference teachers make. And she was talking in particular about a very difficult time that she had been going through and um, had
Oh, okay.
been considering taking her life. And I mean, oh my goodness, every person in that room could absolutely feel what she was saying. And she was talking about the impact of two teachers in particular. And she said, one of the teachers who truly helped me through one of the most difficult times of my life and why I'm here today
Wow.
is sitting in this
Right.
room. And it wasn't me because I did not know her. But she turned
No.
and looked at my daughter, who is a teacher. And
Oh,
I
man.
was
Yeah.
like, I was already crying before she even mentioned that. I did not know
Wow.
that my daughter had been her teacher. And
Yeah.
to experience that to someone who was so emotionally raw and to be able to speak in front of adults and then to acknowledge a teacher who had made such a profound difference
Yeah.
to her life, and then to realize it was my
Wow.
daughter she was talking about. It was, I mean, I've talked about my whole full circle here, and I just,
Yeah.
that was such a gift that I received from her talk in knowing that not only are there teachers out there who make such a profound difference on our students when they are experiencing such profound things, but knowing
That's
one, and I can
amazing.
tell
What?
you that for sure, is my
Oh my
daughter.
goodness, that is incredible.
That made me
And
cry.
what a perfect way to end our chat today. Um, oh my goodness. But tell the audience how they can connect with you. So they've got the books, but how else can they connect with you on social media or?
Oh, please. I'm on Twitter at Patrice Bain 1. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Blue Sky. I love to connect with people. I love to keep learning and stay in touch
Amazing.
with
Any
people,
more?
what people are
Any
doing.
more?
I have
Brilliant.
a
Yeah, great. Any more books in the
patricebain.com
pipeline?
website. Well, I have my three: Powerful Teaching, A Parent's Guide to Powerful Teaching, and Powerful Classrooms. And that I really wanted to highlight teachers who are using the science of learning. And I have to tell this too, because I love this. When I was writing that book, I happened to think I have these incredible influencers,
Yeah.
people who have totally influenced me. And I had a thought,
Yeah.
who influences them? So I wrote to over 50 people who have had such great influence over me and asked three questions. Of your own work, what would you recommend? Of someone else's work, what would you recommend?
Yeah.
And who influences you? And I mean, you know, the people who
Yeah.
answered the call. I've got Tom Sherrington,
Wow.
Ross McGill, Dan Willingham. I mean, all of these people who answered those three questions. And so I love my last book, Powerful Classrooms, because it not only talks about my research, but it elevates, it amplifies the voices of teachers who are using it, and then is so filled with
Amazing.
resources of all these influencers. And as for another book, I have asked my family if I ever talk about it, please stage an
That's
intervention.
so funny. Well, sadly, well, we all, I'm not going to
Said
agree
what
with
I
that because
want to say.
we need another Patrice Bain book. So if you could just dig one out, that would be great. Well, again, another great way to finish and a testament, I guess, and me and you and lots of other people have benefited incredibly from connecting with other people. And for those of you, if you're just getting into sort of not social networking, but social networking with a professional lens, then both me and Patrice can't recommend it enough. And please connect with her online, connect with me online. If you like the Leadership Launchpad stuff, then check out the website. And yeah, we'll see you all at the next one. Thanks very much.